Yeah, yeah, humans are pretty consistently the worst. So I have now seen my first ever Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Bugonia. So I've been aware of this director for a while. I've seen trailers. I've heard rave reviews. He always gave off a very art house vibe, and I have always wondered, is that going to grate on me? Because I can enjoy an art house movie, but when something feels like it was designed very specifically to be a capital A art house movie, you can annoy me with how much your head gets up your own ass on that. Um, he balances it pretty well. There's a couple of things like, let me put it this way. I think it was a wise idea to have very little music on the soundtrack. Most of it is just the ambient noise. And I even like the moments at which he chooses to have music come in and the kind of music that is used. I don't love that whenever the music comes in, it is blaringly loud. Didn't need that. But like most of his what otherwise might be like that's just an artsy fartsy way to go about this did actually feel like they benefited the movie, which is kind of similar to how I felt um after seeing Nosferatu, and I'm now forgetting that director's name, but I haven't seen any of his other movies yet either. And I, having now seen Nosferatu, and got, okay, this is artsy, but in a way I can digest, and that isn't distracting me because it. Look, some artsy movies, it really feels like the people who made it they've just had a few vertebrae removed, they've just folded in half, and they are just self-filleting all over the screen. It gets really bad sometimes. Didn't really have that with this, which was nice. It means I might be able to engage with some other of his movies. So, plot wise, if you don't know this movie, it features primarily Jesse Plemons playing a conspiracy theorist who has kidnapped Emma Stone's character, who is I believe, pharmaceutical CEO. Definitely sort of in the vein of tech and big pharma, etc. She's in that mold. I think the specifics of what her company does don't super matter. And I'm kind of guessing based off a couple of things, but again, what they actually do is kind of irrelevant. But he has kidnapped her because he believes that she is an alien who is trying to subvert humans and destroy or conquer or something along those lines the earth. That's why he shaves her head immediately, because he thinks that she will use her hair to contact the mothership for help. So we then have a bunch of extended scenes with her and him, and also the cousin of Jesse Plemons' character, Donnie, who is they don't say specifically. I'm not sure if he is meant to be on the spectrum specifically or just generally developmentally stunted. But he's somebody that Teddy, that's Jesse Plemons' character. He's somebody that Teddy it was able to rope in. He's somebody who trusts and believes Teddy, so Teddy was able to get an accomplice in on all of this. I mean, Teddy exploits it, like just straight up. And we have scenes of mostly dialogue as she tries initially to make the claim, like, I'm not an alien. Like, are you listening to yourself? I'm not an alien. And he is very insistent. Like, he gets angry that from his perspective, she keeps lying to him. So she tries to change tactics. She tries to confess, but she does it in a way that he's like, I don't believe, like, you're just saying the words. You didn't even confess in your own language. She's not giving the additional details that would satisfy him. So we have this escalation, and as she's a large, important figure, she is, being looked for, and they're kind of on the clock because Teddy is very insistent that on the lunar eclipse, her spaceship, the mothership, will be able to come in contact with Earth again. And what he wants is he wants to be taken up on the ship to negotiate basically the Andromedan withdrawal from Earth. That's his goal. The whole thing, again, aided by the fact of how little music there is very uncomfortable and unsettling. And I think more use of music than there is would have really overcooked it. No, the restraint is admirable, and it is absolutely a top tier platform upon which for Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone to stand on and just frickin' nail it. Like, they're so good at what they're doing. Like, Emma Stone is one of those performers who you can watch, like, doing in an objective sense very little with her face, but like it looks like she's thinking. She has that thing where you can just look at her and feel like you can almost hear her thoughts just watching, like little movements of her eyes or like the smallest twitch of her face. She's got that, which is great for this character. And Jesse Plemons, I mean, like, the man's superpower as an actor seems to be able to simultaneously come across as sympathetic and horrible. Like, there is something innately cuddly about the guy. Like, especially when he has more vulnerable moments, you just want to give the guy a hug. But also, he's a freaking monster, and that's believable as well. Jesse Plemons is really good at doing both those things simultaneously. The other performers are good as well. Really, the only other two that matter are Donnie, and there is a cop who shows up a couple times who has a history with Teddy. Those, and I'm not going to say that either of those were amateur actors. Neither of those were people I'd ever seen before, so obviously the idea was to get smaller names for those, and they both feel very natural and believable in the parts that they're playing. So cast works very well. For the most part, I did enjoy this. There's basically two things about it that I kind of take issue with. Although in both cases, I am going to say this still does a thing I wish fewer movies would do, but it did them pretty well, if not as well as they can be done. But it does still annoy me that they did them. One of them, no, neither of them I can do non-spoilers. Both of these things I have to do as spoilers. So overall, it is tense. I'm not going to say it isn't violent, but it is not exploitatively or excessively explicitly violent. There's really only one graphic kill that's done on screen, and even that is briefly. The others, like, you see the graphic aftermath of to a certain extent, but like there's a lot of restraint in what the camera actually shows, which helps. But I need to talk about the two things that I'm kind of like, you did it very well, but I kind of would rather you hadn't done it at all. And those are spoilers, so that's your warning. So the first of these is something that I like. At this point, I kind of need to see movies stop doing this. And then the other one is much more a personal taste thing. The one that I'm actually getting to the point where I need to start putting my foot down about this. Please don't validate conspiracy theorists. Because in case you didn't watch the movie and are skipping and allowing to hear the spoiler section, turns out Teddy's right. And I don't just mean broadly speaking that she's an alien. It's not like that classic Twilight Zone episode in the diner where it's like, oh no, there are aliens, but not the one they were expecting, sort of thing. But it's I get spoilers for a classic episode of Twilight Zone. Apologies, but down to granular details, Teddy was right across the board. Where she was from, the hair thing was correct. The timing of the ship, the design of the ship, like, he was right across the board. And I'm really uncomfortable with that at this point. Look, here's something that I've said before, and I'm going to say it again. and I may or may not need to do a main channel video on this. I don't know if I have the stomach for it, but conspiratorial mindsets are dangerous no matter what political ends they serve or what directions they lean. It's obviously very easy to pick on right-wing conspiracists because that's freaking QAnon, and we've seen the results being Pizzagate and nonsense like that. I am no less uncomfortable with left-wing conspiracy stuff, and I see it increasingly. And I feel like our media has spent the last 30 years downplaying or validating conspiracy-minded characters. Because you'd have a character like Fox Mulder on X-Files, who is basically never met a conspiracy he didn't like, and he is the hero of that show. You had movies like Conspiracy Theory, flat out validating that the guy was right about at least a bunch of stuff, if not everything he said. And even as recently as Zootopia 2, you had a character in that who's basically a conspiracy theorist podcaster. And while she's not necessarily validated as being correct about everything, she is able to join the good guys, and her kooky ideas are treated as funny. It's not funny. Conspiratorial thinking is dangerous. The thought process, not just the results you come to, not just the conclusions you land on, the thought process of conspiratorial thinking, which is immune to actual evidence, is dangerous. And I'm sure some people will try and argue, well, obviously Teddy did find actual evidence. That's how he knew all the specific details. Like, we do not know that until the end. Functionally, in terms of how he was presented, he is indistinguishable from any random nutcase who is spewing conspiratorial stuff online or screaming on the street corner. There is functionally no difference. So going, oh, but this guy was correct, even if you run with the idea that off screen, because none of it's shown, that he actually did research and found real evidence, none of that is presented. So it's not a case that is made other than, hey, the conspiracy guy was right. Now, I'm not saying this movie is trying to validate conspiratorial mindsets. I think that even though Teddy is factually correct, the movie actually does a very good job of being clear that doesn't make him a good guy or a hero. But at the same time, I'm just at a point where I have a hard time remembering the last time I saw a conspiratorially minded character in a movie or TV show who wasn't either validated or played as a joke. And when you play them as a joke, you treat them as harmless. There are some ways to treat, dangerous people as a joke and not simultaneously treat them as harmless. I think Mel Brooks had his head in the right place with that. Jojo Rabbit's a fantastic example of that. But for the most part, when these characters are played for laughs, which is not the case here, but I'm kind of on a bigger thing now, that makes it seem like, oh, they're just kooks. Aren't they silly? They're not silly. They're dangerous. And I'm really at a point where I have a hard time digesting conspiratorially minded characters that get validated in entertainment. I just do. And that kind of made this hard. Now, that I do think is not strictly speaking a problem with this movie, but it is an overall societal pattern in our entertainment that I am pretty much at my limit with, and I have run out of patience for. I think this is probably the last time I'm going to come away from a movie that does this and still come to the ultimate conclusion that it was a good movie. I think this tops me up. My cup runneth over, and I think I've had my fill. So onto the thing that is more subjective. I don't like that it's the end of the world. Actually, you want to be blunt. I don't super love that he's validated, not just for the conspiratorial reasons, but also duh. That's the most obvious twist to do with this. I mean, it's a remake, for crying out loud. In the original movie, Korean movie, I believe, called Save the Green Planet, done in 2003, this was slightly more surprising. But as I said, it is very much a Twilight Zone style twist. It's not shocking to see. I don't know, I'm not even sure it's played as a twist. And I do wonder how it played for people who didn't immediately just call okay, he's going to turn out to be right. Or at the very least, she's going to be an alien, even if he's wrong about all the specifics, which it turned out he wasn't. But this ultimately results in Emma Stone deciding that their experiments on the planet Earth are over and they wipe out humanity. I am definitely at some point, I've been thinking about it for a little while, going to do a video about ending the world and why it so often hits me really wrong. The overall thing most of the time is it just feels so bitter and nihilistic in like the worst possible way. And there's this. So while it is kind of interesting that like we just get all these panning shots or even these still shots of all these people who clearly just dropped dead wherever they were standing, whatever they were doing. But we get so many of those. It's shot after shot after shot after shot. And I'm going like, I get it. Can we stop now, please? There were, however, two things that this movie does that do mitigate this and make this about as solid as I was ever going to be able to take it. One, there is a moment with like a cat in the background. I think there's one where we see a bird. So it's just humans. And we actually end on an image of bees pollinating a flower, which is the same image we opened with. So there is a sense of hopefulness for the planet, just not the species. So that helps. That doesn't fully take the stink of excessive anger at humanity, which, like, look, as a general instinct, I get we suck, but it doesn't fully remove the taint of that feeling, but it dulls it a fair bit. And then the other thing, which I kind of alluded to earlier, is I actually really appreciate the way Yorgos Lanthimos depicts violence, which is that it's pretty much never exploitative. The violence that occurs within this movie is all either in the distance in a long shot, or it happens off screen. Again, we see the outcome. Like Donnie, puts a gun under his own chin and pulls the trigger. But while we see the blood splatter hit Emma Stone's character, we don't see it as a moment, or at least it felt like we didn't specifically see it. Or even like with the wiping out of the planet, we don't watch these people die; they're just already dead. When we get the panning shots. So I actually really appreciate the incredibly non-exploitative way that he depicts violence in this. It is never depicting violence is tricky because violence can be cathartic, and the camera by its nature has a tendency to be what's the word? Aggrandizing of whatever it's being pointed at. So minimizing it by having the actual violence happen just off camera, even though we clearly know what is happening, or having it happen like so far in the distance of a long shot that, again, we can see what's happening, but it doesn't have the impact of the camera glorifying it. Like there's a bit where Teddy is torturing her with electroshock, and the bulk of the shot is her hand like gripping the arm of the chair, and you see Teddy in the background. It could have lingered on her face, like we hear her moaning and screaming and in pain, but it could have lingered on her face, but it doesn't. Again, I appreciate how he approaches violence in this movie, and from what I've heard, I think this is indicative of how he handles violence overall, which some people could dismiss as artsy, and I will say is incredibly thoughtful. So, while this movie does a couple of things that are, here's the one other thing I'll say with violence, because I did mention there is one character who we do actually kind of see like the impact of a shovel on his head, and that's the cop. But I don't feel like that's incongruous, because we find out through dialogue that cop used to babysit Teddy, and he he did things to Teddy. I'm okay with seeing that guy's head bashed in. Sorry, not sorry. Anyways, Bugonia. Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts on this, or at least thoughts about some of what it does. Anybody else seen this? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe, all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lupfula, Daphne Matthews, Kay Johnston, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Snark Shark, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Magdalena, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Twilord, Tracy Scrabbit, Palba Rabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and additionally from the lower tiers of support, I'd also like to thank Isabel Lovelace, Hey Chica, and Lee Campo. What are you guys doing? Oh my goodness, who's back there? Oh, Worm, why do you do this? Ah!